Hi, this is Barbara from Second Wind EB5. Today's video is dedicated to a discussion of the regional center statistics. What numbers are regional centers should be sharing with their investors, what information you should ask for, and what are the most important statistics for the investors. This we're going to cover in this short video. Nick Bonagorio, who is vice president of one of the largest regional centers in the US, joined me today for this discussion. Thank you so much, Nick, for finding time for this recording.
Thank you so much for having us, Barbara. It's always been a pleasure working with you over the years, and it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Great. So when investors start to look for the EB5 project, they hear here and there that regional center statistics are important. But at the same time, all regional centers state that they have a great ones. So, Nick, what are the numbers which regional centers typically provide to investors? And we can use the statistics of your regional centers to make it a bit easier to understand.
Sure, of course. So I guess let's start framing the conversation by what really is the criteria of success for an EB5 investor. So from an immigration perspective, there's two important EB5 immigration milestones that investors should be concerned about. The first is getting their conditional green card or their temporary green card. This is achieved by the first application being approved, the I-526 or now I-526E petition. At this stage, USCIS is evaluating two primary data points. One is whether the investor's source of funds meets the requirement of the EB5 program. The investor will work very closely with their immigration attorney for this piece. And the second is whether the investment qualifies for EB5 immigration benefits. And this is the regional center's responsibility to make sure the investment qualifies. The next immigration milestone the EB5 investor should be concerned about is getting their permanent green card, or said differently, having the conditions removed from their green card. And this is achieved by the second application being approved, called the I-829 petition. At this stage, USCIS is primarily evaluating whether or not the EB5 applicant's investment resulted in the creation of a minimum of 10 jobs for permanent U.S. workers. And this is all the responsibility of the regional center. For the EB5 investor, this is a passive investment. It is the regional center that is responsible for making sure the investment funds are spent appropriately and that the jobs are created in accordance with the project-related documentation that were approved with the I-526 petition. So from an immigration perspective, when a prospective EB5 applicant is evaluating a regional center's track record, they should first ask how many I-526 and or I-526E petition approvals the investors have received in the past. This indicates a regional center's ability to meet the project requirements of a conditional green card. The investor should then also ask how many I-829 petition approvals the regional center has. This indicates a regional center's ability to meet the job creation requirements of attaining a permanent green card. Generally, there are two primary goals for an EB5 investor. They want to accomplish their immigration benefits, their immigration goals, and they want to have their investment capital repaid in full. Or simply said, you want to get your green cards and you want to get your money back. Those are the two criteria of success. So,
is there any possibility to have the first petition approved? Because in the first petition, you do provide all the business plan and all information about the project. But can it theoretically happen that you get approval for the first petition, but you would not have approval for the second one?
Absolutely, that's possible. If the business plan makes sense and the source of funds is clean, the investor's I-526 should be approved. But if the funds are not spent appropriately, if they are not spent in accordance with the business plan, if we can't prove that the jobs were created, their I-829 could be denied.
Okay, and talking about the numbers of your regional center, how many I-526 petitions you have approved in your portfolio, and how many of I-829 petitions are approved?
Very good. So Can-Am, we've been working in immigration by investment for over 30 years and EB5 specifically for over 20 years. We've worked with over 6,500 families, and thus far, we have over 5,200 I-526 petition approvals, and we have over 2,700 I-829 petition approvals.
And why there is such a big difference between the number of I-526 petitions approved and the second item?
It's a very, very common question we get often. Why is there a gap between these two numbers? It's approximately half, right? The answer is processing time. For most EB5 investor families, there's going to be a minimum of a 4 to 5 year gap between the I-526 petition approval and the IA-29 petition approval, in many cases, even longer. But we at Can-Am have never had any of these petitions denied due to anything project related. We have a few dozen denials total between both the I-526 stage and the IA-29 stage, but all due to individual investor issues. No I-526 denials due to the merits of our project, no IA-29 denials due to insufficient job creation.
Sometimes when we look at the statistics of the regional center, we see not number of petitions approved, but actually number of green card received in total. What the difference between these two? Because like once you said that like the initial and like main goal of the EB5 program is to get the green card. So what the difference between number of petition and number of green cards?
Thank you for asking. I actually often bring that up when I speak with prospective investors. Certainly, when you're speaking with regional centers, always specifically ask about the number of petition approvals, the number of I-526 petition approvals, and the number of IA-29 petition approvals. A single petition includes the primary applicant, their spouse if they're married, and any children under the age of 21. So on average, a single petition is, about 2 to 3 investors per family. But what USCIS is evaluating is the petitions, not the number of green cards. So naturally, since the petitions include multiple family members, there's always going to be a larger number. It's going to sound more compelling because it's bigger, but always focus on the petitions. The petitions of what's being evaluated by USCIS, it's the much more important statistic.
Okay, and out of these two, obviously, the second one, 8 to 9 petition, has definitely more weight for investors when they compare, because that's the goal of investor, to get the second petition approved and to receive a permanent green card, right?
Of course. I mean, certainly both are important, but the I-526 petition is certainly the easier part. Again, if the source of funds is clean and our business plan and our project documentation makes sense and our job creation methodology makes sense, the I-526 should be approved. But the IA-29 petition approval is certainly the harder part, making sure that the money is spent appropriately, the jobs are created, that meets USCIS standards is the more challenging part. So both are important, but certainly do focus on IA-29 petition approvals.
So that's we covered part from immigration perspective. If we talk about financial part, what the main statistics which majority of the regional center providing or should be providing?
Of course. Well, as important as getting your green card is getting your money back. So regional centers should be reporting how much money they have repaid back to their investors. At Can-Am, for example, thus far we've raised over $3 billion and we've already repaid over $2.27 billion back from our projects, which is the leader in the industry by quite a large margin. So do ask from the regional centers you speak with, how much money have they repaid back to their investors? That's really completing the cycle, getting your conditional green card, getting your permanent green card, and having your capital repayment is the full cycle of the EB5 investment.
And here the same question as with petitions. You mentioned the number of what amount you raised for the EB5 project and repaid, and there is a difference between them.
And loan terms are commonly for a period of 4 or 5 years, subject to extension options. Funds that are still in their loan terms will not be repaid until the loan matures, but this does not mean that the project is not successful.
One of the interesting metrics is return capital. As we know, the project first returned funds to the NCE, a company where initially investor invested their funds. And only afterwards, this money repaid back to investors, if they're eligible. In the old pre-RIA rules, it's 2 years from the moment that they receive their conditional green card. In the new rules, it's 2 years after the funds were made available to the project. But there is still some uncertainty about this rule. Nick, how would you describe the sustainment period and what's happening with it now?
Absolutely. So what you're referring to is the new interpretation of the sustainment period, which really dictates how long an EB5 investor must maintain the at-risk requirement of their immigration. Before the Reform and Integrity Act was passed in 2022, investors were required to sustain their investment until they completed their 2-year conditional residency period. The Reform and Integrity Act changed this language and now requires that investors must maintain their at-risk requirement for no less than a 2-year period, and requires that the jobs must be created before they are eligible for the repayment of their capital from an immigration perspective. Unfortunately, this new language has caused a lot of uncertainty in the industry because it is not clearly defined when the 2-year period begins and when the 2-year period ends. The limited guidance that we currently have is that the period begins when the funds have been placed at risk and under the applicable requirements, including being made available to the job creating entity. Now, the ongoing conversation in the industry is, how exactly is this interpreted? And our job at the regional center is to minimize our clients' immigration risk. And what many in the industry believe is the safest way to interpret this requirement is to consider the start date of this 2-year period, not only when the funds have been made available to the JCE, but also when they are spent on the job creating activity. Once all of the EB-5 funds have been spent on qualified expenses, it would be very difficult to argue that the at-risk requirement has not begun. This is one of many reasons why investors should be cautious of projects with very short terms of only 2 or 3 years. It is unclear whether this period of time would capture the USCIS interpretation of the at-risk requirement. The EB-5 industry is looking forward to additional clarity from USCIS, and we will all adjust accordingly. But for now, at Can-Am, we think a conservative interpretation is safest for our clients. Investors must also be aware that in addition to meeting their at-risk requirement of their EB-5 immigration, they will also need to be mindful of the financial terms of the project they invest in. And most development projects will typically need at least a 4-year term to complete construction, stabilize the project, which means that the asset is revenue generating consistently, and then safely exit the project from a financial perspective, most commonly via refinancing.
So I assume the most complicated situation which investor can get in if he invests in the project which initially offered the term of, for example, 2 years from the moment of investment. And by the end of these 2 years, he would be in position that he's not sure if he can get his funds back or not. And the regional center most probably not will return these funds because there is still be no clarity from USCIS side.
That's exactly it. So in projects where it could be a short loan term, but you're not certain when your sustainment period technically begins and ends in the eyes of USCIS, which we won't know for many years until they start adjudicating post-Reform and Integrity Act I-829 petitions. So with that uncertainty, you could be in a situation where your money would have to be reinvested into a different type of project, which may be a very different risk profile than your original investment.
Yeah. Thank you for outlining this part. This is when you talk about the amount, but if we talk about the projects, what is the number of projects for which Can-Am raised money and how many projects where funds were returned back?
Thus far, Can-Am has sponsored 68 EB-5 projects, and so far, 51 projects have repaid in full and on time.
Yeah, and I guess, of course, the most important part is how many projects already repaid funds back. However, it's also important to realize for how many projects the regional center was able to raise funds, because it's not easy as well. And we see that the small regional centers who doesn't have enough experience, they may struggle to raise the funds even for 1-2 projects. So you should pay attention on this one as well. And if we talk about the statistics, should investors just believe to regional centers of what they said or what the information is on presentation, or they actually should ask for some verifying information or documents?
Well, I think a safe general rule of thumb is always ask for verification when you're getting data. And certainly for something as large of an investment as EB-5 is and as personal of an investment, that certainly does apply. So we at Can-Am, for example, do take the additional step of having our track record audited by a global accounting firm. They do a full forensic audit verifying our I-526 petition approvals, our I-829 petition approvals, and our repayment numbers so that our clients and our partners can know that this is verified information.
Thank you. So, covering all these statistics, what is the most important number investors should pay attention at, in your personal opinion?
Well, I think certainly the number of I-526 petition approvals, the number of I-829 petition approvals, and the amount of repayments are the most crucial things. You want to make sure that folks have gotten their green cards, and you want to make sure they've gotten their capital repaid in full, and with third-party verification.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and interesting conversation.
My pleasure, Barbara. Thank you for having us.
I hope this was useful for our listeners as well. If you have any more questions, please ask them in the comments below. We will be happy to answer them. This video was hosted by Second Wind EB5, a third-party promoter working outside the US. Our goal is to provide the best choice of EB5 projects from regional centers with proven track records. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.